Oh man.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Rally Podcast. I'm Mike White here with Logan Cornelius and Shaun Boyer. I'm going to call it a mini ep. I don't think we're going to be chatting as long as sometimes we usually do, but we wanted to hop on and talk about Cisek Showalter. Not that we haven't talked about them enough in the past million years. But the news is that they announced their retirement. They will not be returning together to compete in SRA events going forward. Of course, some kind of saw this coming as we didn't see them at all last year. Of course, they could have played less due to COVID, but we didn't really see much action from them. But anyway, we're going to take this time to kind of reflect and see what comes up and just chat a little bit about these two guys that won a lot of stuff. And we argued on the last podcast that they had an incredible legacy. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to first kind of say, I guess I kind of want to give the context that like Cisek Showalter as we know it, as now is this crazy thing. But back in the day, it was such it was a really interesting thing. Going back, it's easy to think like, oh yeah, these two were so strong. But really, I remember obviously in 2015 when they had a big win. 2016, they came in second even to Ian and Dylan. But going into 2017, there was still like not that stuff about them. I don't have a question, I guess. But do you guys remember kind of like looking back, kind of the vibe around Cisek Showalter / Moist before their big tournament days?
Well, I mean, we can go even before that when they weren't playing together. So we had the rookies and PJ bouncing around monkey business for a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they were good players in their own right. And I think a lot of people saw a ton of potential because they were young. Mm-hmm. But once they teamed up is when sort of everyone was like, oh, this is going to be a scary combo.
Yeah. And at the time, right, Tyler, they teamed up mid 2016. At the time, Tyler, although they weren't really known before that, right, the rookies got fourth at nationals and were a pretty big force there. Peter John was very new on the scene. I remember on my way to Lancaster 2015, where he was playing with his brother Seth, there was just chatter about him. I think he's really only played with like a couple people. And the notion was that he hit on two all the time, and that you could really not defend his hits. But again, at that tournament, it was interesting because that was true watching them, but they also lost to Nightly Flip, Ian and Jenna. So like they come in hyping this kid up like they're the best, and then I don't think they lost in the semis, right? And they didn't, have to play Origin Elite, who is like the one of the tops at the time, or even the rookies. So even like when they had a lot of hype before they played together, it was still like lower levels of hype. If you know what I mean? Definitely were untested.
Yeah, I was thinking. I mean, I felt like before I remember before the first season they played. Where I was like, okay, are they going to be good? Like, yeah, they won that game against Chico, but like now a full season together, they're going to be good. And I kind of like looking back, I feel like there was still that same sentiment before every preseason, even after they won, where it's like, okay, like, are they going to do that? Are they going to be able to perform the way they did? And they always did. And like, especially before the first season they played, like Shaun was saying, like they're both solid players who had success, but neither had like the ultimate success. Mm-hmm. And so it was cool them coming together and just like really meshing.
Yeah, it's so looking back at where they are now, it's obvious to say that like obviously Cisek Showalter, it makes sense that they beat Chico in 2015. But I think that's revisionist goggles. The truth is it was a bit of a fluke, right? They were good players. It was a good day, a little bit of I don't want to say fluke is the bad word, but like they weren't the better team, right? They weren't the better team.
Yeah. And I'm sure Chico was a little bit like, okay, like not that Chico didn't have to try, but Shaun, like you guys were pretty dominant. So like I'm sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure there was a little bit of laxness. And maybe you don't want to say anything because like that takes away from their win. But Chico always had that about them where they were so dominant. Like it's like, okay, are they actually trying? And maybe they were playing full out, but that echo was always there in that game. So I know what you're saying.
It's an interesting point because like any matchup, who you're going to play affects sort of your attitude towards that game, or the pressure that's going to be put on you. And so, of course, we're playing two guys that we're playing together for the first time, who are not unknown, but they haven't had massive success. So we're like, oh, like we're the champs. We're going to walk in here and we're going to mop the floor with them. And of course, that didn't happen. I do now wonder what the sort of the history of Cisek Showalter would have been if we had beat them that day. We can speculate. But the other point I want to bring up along these lines is like in 2016 when we lost to two guys, I do remember thinking like we were expecting to play Strange, who would be played before in the previous nationals, like these guys are really good. And when two guys won, it was definitely like, oh, like it was the wrong thing to think, but I was like, oh, we got this in the bag. Like this is us, like another national championship.
Yeah.
And they came in and they worked us. So you really got to be careful with how you think about the teams you're playing and what you expect from them.
Yeah. And I think putting the time between them playing together and this first event, right? It was June 2015 where they won Summer Spike. They played another tournament in the fall later that year, cream of the crop, and they won that. And so that was pretty big because Shrimp and Grits just won Southeast Regionals. Nashburg just won East Regionals. So those are two big wins. And I believe Ian and Dylan were playing together there. So they earned a win that day. And so that was like, okay, they are solid. Like maybe they'll play together. And then they didn't. They played together again the next March and actually lost the tournament to Ian and Dylan. And then I think that was the last time we saw them until the year after. So if you're wondering, Anchored, Boisterous, and Ian and Dylan, Phantom Express are the three teams that beat them in bracket. But it was interesting because like they kind of dabbled and you're like, okay, maybe they'll play together. And then it didn't happen until 2017. And even going into that, right, Rookies and Sophie both lost in the quarters at nationals. So going in, it is kind of this idea of like, oh, two guys coming in, but they didn't come in obviously because they didn't have results, but like at number one. And it was still kind of like with Strange being so good and two guys just winning nationals, it wasn't like, okay, here come these guys that are going to be the number one team. It's like, okay, we got a top three that are really solid. Yeah.
Yeah. They just combined really well. Thinking back, it's just like the chemistry to just put together the string like they did is really impressive. And there was, like you're saying, proof they were going to be good, but it wasn't like before they came on, it's like, okay, yeah, this they're going to win the next three national championships, and two of them it's going to be pretty easy. It was very much like we have a competitor.
I remember there was a lot of hype around the first event, I think, which was San Francisco that they went to. And there was a lot and it was double limb. So it's like, let's really see how these guys are. And they won. So it was like, okay, all right, they're legit. And then of course it didn't stop after that. But they did have some competition.
Did you say, Mike, that what were they ranked in the power rankings coming into the season? And then what were they ranked after that tournament?
So I think they were 3 behind two guys in Strange and then became 1 after their tournament win.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they jumped up. I mean, they made a name for themselves pretty quick that year.
Yeah, they won all of the events. So let's go. What? You go.
I was gonna say, did you look up the power rankings? I was gonna pull up the power rankings from 2017.
You can look it up. That's my remembrance. It could be wrong.
You're right. I'll read the text, which I'm sure you wrote, Mike. Cisek Showalter, number 3, a popular early pick to take home the pitchers at nationals. Cisek and Showalter are 2 of the winningest players in Roundnet. Once they get their chemistry down, few teams will stand a chance against this powerhouse.
So I guess we did
wise
know.
words, Mike.
Mike saw it coming, man.
Yep. Easy favorite. I mean, but like looking through it, like that's 2017 and 2018. Like 2019 was a different story. They won nationals, but it was a little harder. 2017 and 2018, they were like actually unbelievable. Their only loss was to Anchored, which we all remember, and that was one of my favorite days in Roundnet history. It was so fun. But after that, they went to the Chicago Grand Slam, and I think they won the finals like 21-7, one of the games. Like 2017 and 2018. 2018, they didn't lose a tournament, and Nationals finals wasn't even bad. Like 2 straight years, they were like absolutely untouchable, which is like ridiculous.
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah. Like 2018 was the most casual of a year where that they didn't lose a tournament. Like, it's so funny. So we can just get into our kind of next topic was like having this one dominant team. But it's kind of ridiculous looking back. Like the whole storyline of the whole season is either who's number 2 or it's will someone beat them? And the thing is Anchored did, and Anchored was like number 5 at the time. So like they didn't even get dethroned. Neither Chico nor CS, besides CS, started at 3. Once they got to 1, they didn't drop, which was like absurd. What?
Yeah. And it was like everyone would always like pull strings, be like, okay, hey, like what it'll take to drop them to 2. And it's like, even if they lose a tournament to the number 2 team, you still can't drop them to 2. Like there's just not enough evidence like that.
I think the only case, so it was funny again, right? Early season 2019, they lose to Anchored in the quarters in Seattle, and Boisterous wins the tournament. And it's like, okay, good win for Boisterous, but like you can't drop them because Anchored beat them. And then again, it's like, okay, well then they beat Boisterous, I think. But then the next was they lose to Boisterous in Nashville, but then Boisterous loses the tournament. So it's like, okay, all right, if you won the tournament, you probably would have been number 1, but we're not putting you there. And it was so, I mean, that would have been it. If Boisterous beat Marktega at Nashville, they probably would have been number 1. But I don't know. For me, the hypest thing was going into nationals, because going into nationals every single year, right? 2014. All right, Chico's probably going to win. 2015, Chico's probably going to win. 16, Chico's probably going to win. 17, CS is going to win. 18, CS is going to win. 19 is like, okay, they're 1-1 versus Boisterous. Let's see how this goes. And for me, I mean, that obviously made for one of the best nationals finals we ever had. And I still, to this day, kind of can't believe CS won. I remember in the moment, I was a big doubter. I'm like, is this actually happening? But I don't know. Shaun, you were commentating, right?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, with the atmosphere, everyone around too, it was super hype. We had some good rallies throughout. So it was a big one. I remember not knowing who I was rooting for, because like selfishly not wanting CS to like overcome the national championships, but then also like rooting for them just as people.
Yeah.
So it was a great matchup.
It sounded like a lot of fun. Didn't get to watch any of it live, but
you're too busy in the finals.
Yeah, too busy in the important bracket.
I remember at the time thinking like, this is huge. Either if Boisterous wins 1, it's cool. Caleb is so young getting that, but also Preston now has 2 championships. So ties Shaun and Skylar and Tyler and PJ. So we have 5 people with 2 championships. So that actually would have been kind of crazy. And it's so hard. I think you always struggle. Like, it's like, I don't know if I'm rooting for Boisterous or just an upset is exciting. If you know what I mean? Like, it always comes in. I think I was rooting for Tyler and PJ because I think getting that 3-peat was just so sweet. And I want to never mention this again every time, but Chico not getting it has made me forever want to give it to them. And I'm like, so if CS didn't get it, I would have been like, this is just tragic all over again. Yeah, it would have been cursed. Well, Ogre's already got theirs though, so we'll count that.
speaking of dominance, I mean, I feel like there's just this, our sport has had such dominant teams across all divisions since its inception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a function of Roundnet or just something that kind of happened? Is it a coincidence?
I think that like intuition would say it's a coincidence, but it's hard to argue when CS followed Chico and Ogres on the women's side is equally, if not more dominant. It's like, that's a pattern, but what can we point to?
And then, I mean, one thing that is interesting is like if you look at after, I guess, since it's more CS focused, talking Ogres a little off topic, but like after Ogres won their like final championship and they split up for the 2019 season, like that was kind of an exciting season because it really was up in the air. Like all the teams are beating each other, and like it's making me think like, is having a dominant team doesn't make things more exciting because like it's kind of like you have that standard that everyone's trying to bring down, but when that's not there, is it less exciting? And I think personally, I found myself at the Super Bowl this year rooting for Tom Brady because like seeing something dominant is like so impressive. And like for him to win 7 Super Bowls, like that's amazing. And then like with college football, like if A&M's not going to win, like I find myself sometimes cheering for Bama just because it's like what they're doing is so impressive. And it's like, does it make sport more exciting to have a dominant team than to not?
So the things that came to mind for me is that like truthfully, I think from like a sport perspective, it does help to have some sort of image, right? Like Michael Phelps is the swimming, right? You think of Olympic swimming, you think of Michael Phelps, and that's a very specific example, but like it helps to have a certain team that it's like, oh yeah, these are the guys, right? And you can have like some fluctuation, and obviously you could have multiple top teams, but it's really cool to have like these are the guys from a or these are the girls with ogres coming in. If you care anything about women's roundnet, you just know ogres. From a content perspective, I think it's forever content of who will beat these teams, and it does add a layer of excitement. I think the issue is if that doesn't happen often, right? If CS and Chico were number 1, but every 3 tournaments they lose, so they're averaging 2 out of 3, right? I think that's a little, or arguably that could be worse. But I think that's a little different than winning every single one, because even if someone beats them, it's like, all right, that was cool. On to the next one. I think it kind of does. It does hurt, but it's hard. I think it's also fun to root for. But I'm sure it's really, really frustrating for players as well.
And I feel like there's something fun, and this is something we haven't really seen because even though Chico lost their last final championship, they still kind of went out on top. And like now CS is going out on top. I think part of what makes sport fun is like seeing the fall of that dominance, seeing something so dominant, and then like seeing that transition, which like this season will be a lot of fun because it will be somewhat of a transition, but we haven't really had that kind of transition where like a team has been dominant and they try to maintain that dominance, but are being overcome actively. We've just seen that transition in a passive sense where the top team is finishing on top.
Yeah, I think that makes it's really, I also hate, I love and hate these arguments that it's like, would a team now beat 2016 2 guys at nationals? The answer is yes. But that stuff makes me think, right? Like, obviously, right, if Cisek Showalter plays in a tournament this year and lose, it can be they aren't practicing, they are taking it serious. But there would be something really cool, right? Like they play this season and they take it serious and they are worse, right? That shows how good these other people are getting, which I think you're getting at. It puts in perspective how skilled the players are to know how good they are compared to these teams that dominated in the past and still have their skills.
Yeah. I mean, I know you had it down, but like part of it is just like, will will there be dominance rise from the ashes, or will we be in this like Wild West era where teams will compete and there won't be a dominant team, or will a dominant team rise? Or I know like Preston has obviously been in the conversation for a long time. Is he going to rise into that dominant position?
Yeah.
Well, the X factor here too is the no hit zone now.
Yeah.
And that I really think that opens the door for some new faces to like work their way in.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. I think, obviously Shaun and Skylar, not that you guys were like ahead of the game, but you were just so good early on. And that definitely helped you, right? You kept having to improve, but you guys like we're back before there were tournaments, you guys were just better and you just maintained that skill over time and kept improving faster than other people were. CS was part of that was, they improved so much before 2017 and kept doing so. But a big part also was they were two really good players that got together. And, Boisterous challenged them this year because it was Preston, who has been incredible for years now, joined with Caleb, who Caleb obviously improved a lot in 2019. But like they formed together because they're like, I think we can do this thing. And so part of the will there be a dominant team does stem from, are we the NBA? Are these super teams going to form? Are they going to try to? I think that's totally okay for them to want to, but that kind of would lead to it. I think the other, if we have two players that are clearly at the top and work really hard, I think we could totally have another team like this.
But I will say on like the super team point is, obviously the NBA, you have 5 players. So 5 superstars, or even like 3, which is generally what we see, like that compounds a lot more on a 5-person team, where like 2, the most you can have is 2 superstars. So the odds are you're probably only going to have 1 more superstar than other teams, or at most 2 more. So I think it is harder to like build that quote unquote super team and to be dominant for so long. Because like, yes, super teams could get together, but with this sport, I don't really see it as super teams. It's more just like teams getting together. Like you want to find the best partner possible that you can mesh with. I think that key then just becomes like, just because 2 players are good doesn't mean that they'll play well together always. And especially now, I think with no hit zone, like Shaun was saying, I think chemistry will be something that's even more important because things matter a lot more. Placement matters. It's not just like you can have a good set, but then you have to have a good set for that kind of player and hitting. And so we'll see how chemistry works out. But just because you have 2 good players, it doesn't mean they'll have a three-peat. You got to have chemistry with those 2 good players. So it's harder to form a super team with a 2-person team.
Mm-hmm.
I think even building off of that too, I think what's going to get harder and harder as the sport grows and people get better is just maintaining consistency. And like we probably were saying the same thing before CS went on their run. And so it's insanely impressive that they were to win as much as they did. But I just don't know how teams are going to consistently win tournament after tournament after tournament, just with the field getting better and better and all these like new strategies coming out. So that'll be a big part. That will come down to what Logan's talking about, chemistry. And I do think one of the big factors in teams, players being able to win compared to like, if you have 2 good players, the thing that'll separate them is mindset and experience. So if you've won a tournament before, if you've been in those finals, if you're good under pressure, that's what I think separates good players from great players.
Bro, 100%. And like part of that comes from like personal experience, because I've never won a tournament. And I just like, obviously I'm not Chico, but like I know when y'all play, like I know your mindset just from being at the top, like you have that going forward. And like obviously CS has had that. And so it's like getting the taste of that top automatically puts you on the other side of things. And like you just feel that when playing teams who have been at the top.
Totally. And it's like, and it's cocky in some ways, but that cockiness feeds into you and you're just like, I know I can win this game.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what you need in those pressure moments to get a serve on or to make that set or to just D up on a good shot. So that's why I do think it is hard for new teams and new players to sort of surge up into podiums and overtake some of these players that have been around for a while. But if and when it happens, we could see a changing of the guard.
And it's part of like one where mashups come into play. Like, I mean, Ryder is someone who, like, he's a newer player, but he's seen the top. And granted, it was like a smaller season and not as many people are playing, but like took him to the top a few times, and he's won several tournaments now. And like Coleman, someone else who's seen that, like these players who've kind of tasted top and been on the other side were brought there by another player, but now have been there and can come from that place. And so it'll be interesting to see. And I think a hot take I'm going to throw out here is like, I don't think we'll see another three-peat within the next 20 years of this sport. I'll throw that out there.
If this podcast is still going in 20 years,
dude,
Mike, that's a hot take right there.
It might be our kids, or they just hire new young people because no one wants to listen to old guys talk anymore. But
back in my day,
bookmark this. Can you clip on the podcast? So they call it on Twitch, right? Clip that.
Clip that, put it in a Google Drive, remind you 20 years.
Yeah, email this to me, not to arrive until March 40 or 2041. But yeah, next 20, no three-peats in the next 20 years.
I'll talk to you in 20 years, Logan.
Okay, thanks. And you let me know if I'm right or not.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think an interesting point is, obviously, right, two guys played 2 seasons together. Then Preston had 1 year as Wabi Sabi, and then a year as Boisterous, and they're playing again this year as Boisterous. But a big part of the three-peat talk is, do you continue playing? I think the answer is, if you win a nationals, you'll likely keep playing together. So that could be a case for it. But I think like people do change their partners up a lot, and I think that'll actually make it harder because, say Boisterous wins this year, right? Next year, they're not just facing the teams from 21. They're facing new teams that are forming with the idea of challenging them.
Yeah.
And so I think every year, especially as Roundnet grows, it will be harder and harder. So I like your take, Logan, especially because it's the field, right? It's anyone,
for sure.
Right? It's not like, it's not like the Pats. Now they won 3 in a row, but it's like there's a select group, right?
They didn't win 3 in a row. I mean, like, when's the last? Even like the Warriors, like they were far and above, better than everyone else. And granted, they should have won 3 in a row, and injury kept them from doing it. But like winning 3 in a row is not easy at the highest level. And I think winning 3 in a row is easier at the beginning of the sport because it gets more competitive moving on. And like 2. I think in the next 20 years, there will be more, granted on smaller levels, I think there will be kind of like branding deals and like there'll be sponsorship opportunities for teams to stay together. And that will be a little bit of a melding point for teams to kind of play multiple seasons together because they get some sponsorship money out of it and stuff like that. So I think that'll allow teams to stay together, which one, I don't know if that hurts or helps the three-peat because that's just more teams with chemistry. Like would CS have won 3 in a row if, I guess we'll say, Preston had the same partner for 3 years? Like, would that chemistry have developed and they melded, or would it have been like CS just knew them so well it wouldn't have mattered? So,
right.
Well, I do think too, having the sport be dominated by 2 teams over the last 6-7 years has led to more mashups because it's people constantly trying to like crack the code and find the person that they can take down the top team with. But if the tournament wins are getting spread across many different teams, then that's a little reassurance for them to stick together and feel good about what they're doing as compared to break up. So I just think the culture of the community right now has been chasing the top, which just has led to more mashups. So once that mellows out a little bit, we might see some more consistency and people playing and sticking together because they'll have more like frequent success being first places.
It really is a challenge because I think as you improve, you want to improve and you want to try new things. But I think at a certain point too, as Logan's saying, there's sponsorships, but as well as teams like playing more and more, and as people get even more experienced, it'll be less common, because I think something happens a lot where two people will play together and then one will improve faster than the other. And they'll just truthfully want a better partner because they think they can play at a higher level. I think that may be the case less and less as we grow, as we get closer to not the peak, but like as it gets more granular, as you improve, your improvements get smaller. So, you know, two players, instead of in a season, they start off 6 out of 10 and they end, one ends at a 8 out of 10 and one's at a 7. But at that point, you know, getting up to an 8.5 is challenging. So the longer they stick together, they'll probably both hit their kind of I don't want to say stride, but hit something together where it's like, all right, let's keep playing together, work on our chemistry. And it's less about, all right, I'm better than you now, I'm going to go find a new partner.
For sure. I think good place to end would have the wisdom of Mike White, who predicted CS's dominance years ago, to now predict who will be the team to take charge in the years to come. Who's your money on, at least?
And it could be two players not even playing together. Maybe you will speak into existence this dominant team. They'll listen to this podcast and they'll be like, Mike is right. We should play together. You have power here, Mike.
I wish I was
say Shaun and Logan, and maybe we'll play together.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Truthfully, my answer is I think Preston's going to still stay at the top. He's been in that 2 spot for like 4 years in a row. And I think maybe CS isn't it, but I think may find some sort of X factor to take him to the next level. And I will
ask though around that. Do you think the no-hit zone suits Preston?
Yes.
Okay.
I do. I think he has a more well-rounded game than a lot of players, especially ambidextrous and things like that. So I think it'll help him excel over other people. So, and go.
I was gonna say, so are you saying this is the start of the Preston era? Like it's finally begun? There's been glimpses, but it's finally beginning.
Maybe. I don't know. I just think he's not gonna keep getting. I think he'll win some more and stop getting those dang second and thirds. Well, we'll see. I don't know. It's really hard. I think the no-hit zone will definitely help him. But I also wanted to throw, I guess I'm just looking at Boisters right now because I think Caleb Heck, like his growth has been just astronomical. And I think it's going to keep going. I think this is discrediting a lot of people, but I'm also taking the safe bet. So I'm taking the safe bet.
So if we wanted to see a 3-peat champion in the next 6 years, so I'll give you 6 years, you think, and obviously 6 years is a long time because there could be players that come up, but you're saying right now your money would be Preston and Caleb. That's the team to do it. That's the 3-peat right there. If you had to. I know it's a hard question, Mike, and you're discrediting a lot of people.
Yeah, right now if I had to, okay. I think I would.
Okay.
I think I would. I think Preston's consistently just stayed at the top, and I think Caleb, especially his growth from 2018 to 19, was like ridiculous.
I don't think that's a bad take since you're choosing the team that got second when the team that got first is retired.
Yeah, it's the safest take in the book, but that's how I feel.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. I mean, ask me again in like September. Maybe I have a different answer. But I also think like, I'm just also going off of Caleb's freakish growth in that year, not height and skill. I think although I mentioned Preston first, I think I'm now feeling a little more like Caleb will be some sort of force going forward.
So are you saying it's the Caleb era?
That's a good question.
I just want to name this era. Like, what era are we going into? You know, there's the Chico era, there's the CS era. I'm asking you to prognosticate the era.
It's the Hilltop era.
Okay.
Truthfully, as I said before, I'm stoked on Hilltop, but I need to see him play this year. I haven't seen them. Yeah.
The actually heard it here second. Upon us.
I want to say the Hilltop era. That's what I want to say.
Okay, just say it.
But I think that's just me being high on Hilltop because I've known him for so long.
It's true. They do post on social media a lot, and that makes for a good round.
It does.
Granted,
really
they are also actually good too, so that also helps.
It's so like because so their growth has been slower, but I think Caleb's. But I think that's because
ACL
they took it a
do
little more
that.
serious. What?
I said an ACL tear will do that.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. But I want to say like I first met them at Regionals 2015. We beat them like 15-2 in pool play. 2015. And then 2016, I think we are still better than them, but like early 2017, they were so much better than me. And it was just like we went from beating them 15-2 to I think like barely beating them the next year, and then they were better than me like quick. And it's just like, okay, yeah, these guys are good, and now they're insanely good. Yeah, but like it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Yeah, that they can go from a 15-2 loss to like a barely like a top 20 team to 2 years later, like, or 3 years later being like a number 3 team in the country. But that's Roundnet.
And now it's the Hilltop era. So
yep.
That trajectory.
It's really the Dan McPartland era whenever he wants to play. That's really it. Only few will get that reference because he's been out in hiding for a while. All right. Are we gonna end there with my very vague answer to your question and also an extremely safe era?
I grilled you wanting a specific answer, and all I got was vagueness.
I mean, it's just the jury's still out, Logan. The season hasn't even started.
Hey, right? We're talking heads. Talking heads are supposed to just throw stuff out there and say it as it's fact. Haven't you ever watched ESPN?
I think on Dylan Fogarty's Instagram, he was talking about who are the top 3 teams right now, and Travis Core commented like, "This whole new rules. Season hasn't started. This is like nonsense." And I DM'd Dylan. I'm like, "Yes, that's all we talk is nonsense. Yeah, that's the point.
That's what sports talk is. Like,
yeah.
If you're not talking nonsense, you're just like reading off stats, which is fun, but it all has their place. Like that's what makes sports fun, is talking about what's going to happen, what it's going to be. So
yeah. And I kind of hate that sometimes because, as you can see, I hate to speculate on things that I don't know, but that's the whole point. That's the whole point.
Yeah. I'm trying to get better, like, throwing out those takes and saying stuff, like, not necessarily like I don't want to upset people, but like sometimes you say stuff and like it makes people fire. Like, like I'm going to have to eat my words if Utah scores in the top 8 this year because of my hot take. But, like it's fun, and you add it, and like I'm already prepared to get posterized all over the Utah Roundnet Instagram page if it happens. So, but it's fun, and people like to listen to it. At least I hope.
They can just thank you for the extra motivation, Logan.
Yeah, exactly.
Logan, with that inspiration, I will end saying it is the Caleb era.
All right.
There we go.
That's all I wanted, Mike.
All right.
This was a nice mini ep.
It was supposed to be a mini ep, but we've definitely been talking for like 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's a heck of an era. Am I right? Can we quote that?
We're not saying that.
I'll say it. I'll get the catch on. Tell your friends, everyone.
Buys. It's a heck of an era.
It's a heck of an era. We're all living by the buys laws.
All right, we're
gonna end that here. Yeah, we're gonna end that here. Cool. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah, that's all I gotta say. Smash that like button. Smash that like button, please. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our podcast. It doesn't really help us out because we'll keep doing this regardless. But it'd be pretty cool. And if you have things that you want us to talk about, especially nonsensical things, let us know in the comments. But besides that, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Peace.